We're live. Perfect. Yeah, live on Instagram and live on Facebook this morning. Good morning, ICE team. It is Friday. It's Fitness Athlete Friday, October 1st. I think we're all right. Sorry, a little delay there on Facebook. Okay. Connections are coming together here. Apologize about that. All right, I think we're good on both ends now. So good morning again. Sorry to repeat myself there. Happy Friday, October 1st. It's Fitness Athlete Friday today. It's PT on Ice Daily Show. I'm your host today, Joe Hanisco, physical therapist up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and a member of the clinical management, the Fitness Athlete team as well. We're going to be covering knee valgus position during the squat today. The kind of subtitle would be the good, the bad, and the ugly of a knee valgus position, meaning that we're going to find that sometimes it's maybe not as bad as we think, and potentially actually a performance enhancer. But also we got to be keen enough with our eye to be able to pick out which position and which fault is actually potentially problematic there. So before we get going, I wrote down a few courses that we have coming up just to kind of keep you guys in the loop on what we have going on. And this weekend is absolutely packed. Everybody almost out there, all teams are kind of going at it right now. So we have cervical coming live to Delaware this weekend. Extremity management, either Lindsay or Mark, I'm not sure who's down there, but they're going to be in Greenville, South Carolina going on this weekend as well. Modern management, the older adult, is heading to the west side, I think Washington State, Seattle area possibly. I know I saw Dustin Jones post this morning. He's hopping on a plane. So West Coast, be looking out for the modern management, the older adult team, and then lumbar spine management as well. We're hitting that off in Massachusetts. So weekend is absolutely packed. And I know the next couple of weekends, as we come towards the end of the year here, we're going to be filling things up. So if you're looking for live courses, hop on ptonice.com and take a look in your area and see what we have coming. I know my next course will be in 2 weekends from now, the 14th, 15th, 16th of October, I believe it is, up in Fenton, Michigan. That's Mitch Babcock's home gym of CrossFit Fenton, and Zach Long, Mitch, and I will be up there doing fitness, clinical management of fitness athlete live course. So live courses are staying busy. October is a great month for getting on to our online courses as well. We have primary care coming right here, I think this weekend, starting Sunday, I believe it is. So that course is fantastic if you haven't looked into that at all. Morgan Denny, she does a really good job at that. Persistent pain management is coming in October on the 11th, so the following weekend. We have older adult essential and older adult advanced courses starting up in October as well. Those are mid to end of October, so 13th and the 20th, I believe, respectively. So either way, if you're feeling like you're on a shortage of ICE course, we got plenty out there for us, so take a look and see what we have there. But all right, let's get back on track then. So knee valgus and squatting, what we're going to cover today, and I really want to break this out into the good and then the bad and the ugly. I think it's basically two tales here that we're going to be kind of dividing and conquering. I want to unpack first the good, and I think to do that, before we really get into it, let's just talk about maybe some key performance points of the back squat, or just any squat technique in general. So if we think about performance points of a squat, often listing them out in the way that we want our feet about shoulder width, maybe hip width apart, somewhere in there. We got some wiggle room. Typically, athletes are going to find that a toed out position, a little bit of external rotation, a few degrees, is advantageous as well. So hip width, toes out. As we go and sit into that squat, sit straight down into that squat, we want our knees and our hips to break together. The whole time that we're moving through here, we're going to maintain a nice braced neutral core position, so we're not losing ourselves into flexion or extension during that squat. As we go and stand back up from that squat, it's a powerful leg drive, keeping our knees in line with our toes, and then finishing that squat standing tall at the top. So that's just a basic outbreak or outline of what the performance points are, what we're looking for from just a basic technical standard. And you're going to see some variation between athletes, between those with different anatomy, between those in different sports, but global 30,000 foot view, we're looking for that. So the good with knee valgus. This topic it's often talked about a lot. We cover it in our essentials courses. We cover it in the live course a little bit in the clinical management of fitness athletes. So it's not a new topic. But for me, the reason why I'm bringing it up is that shortly after the Olympics or during the Olympics, a lot of my CrossFit athletes I'm working with, things like that, picking up on a lot of athletes as they're receiving the barbell in Olympic lifting in the Olympics, they were receiving the barbell, riding it down into that full depth squat. As they're going to stand up, they're seeing their knees kind of whip together, which as a PT, that's something that our eye is looking at and saying, hey, what's going on with that? That looks like potentially something that could be problematic for the hip or for the knee if we're loading ourselves in that position. And it's a valuable question, a reasonable question to look at there. So let's cover that scenario and kind of break that down and unpack that a little bit. So on the descent though with that squat, and we're talking about highly skilled athletes here, just trained athletes and even people that you might see in your gym, but someone who's familiar with a squat, on a good quality squat on the descent, you're going to see really quality knee control. We're not going to see a lot of shifting in and out, and we shouldn't. We should see knees tracking in line with toes and maybe even going a little lateral towards the pinky toe. So as they sit down in that squat, we're not losing knee position on that descent. But on that initial upward ascent from the squat, that kick from the bottom of the hole of our squat, we will sometimes see, especially under increased depths and increased load, that we get a whipping response of both knees. And typically this is going to be both knees and not just one or the other. I'll demo this real quick and see if I can get this on camera here. So sitting down, knees stay in line with toes, but as they go and stand up, you're going to see this quick whip and then a driving back out phase of that squat. And what we call that actually is an adductor whip. Now, for the most part in this scenario that I'm describing, this is not a negative thing. We're actually seeing this as potentially a sort of an innate performance booster. And the reason is that the adductor magnus muscle, which is this vast, huge, medial tissue on our thigh, it connects anterior and posterior. We know that at increased depths and especially under increased loads, the muscle that's producing some of the greatest amount, I think over 50% of the net hip torque to come into hip extension out of that hole is our adductor magnus. So knowing that, we can see that as that muscle contracts to create hip extension, it also has mechanisms of hip adduction and bringing those knees in. And we see that quick engagement as the adductor magnus kicks in, creating that knee valgus or that adductor whip. But the caveat here in our skilled high-level athletes is that they typically don't hang out here long. They're seeing that quick whip, and then it's a drive back out as their glutes and the rest of their quads and everything is engaging and pushing them further out through that bottom of that hole. Their knees are driving back out, and it's a well-controlled position. So adductor whip is the good in this situation. Now, that being said, again, even though we're saying this could be a performance booster, at no point am I really going out to an athlete and saying, hey, John, or hey, Susan, as we go and you hit the bottom of your squat here, what I want you to think about doing is whipping your knees together and then driving them back out. I think if you take that same athlete who you're seeing competing on the floor at the Olympics who under 340 pounds in the clean and jerk, you're seeing that adductor whip as they come out of their squat. If you gave them a 135-pound barbell, they're probably not engaging in that way because their tissues are strong enough to tolerate accelerating them out of that bottom of that hole out that really powerful adductor whipping position. So they are not intentionally whipping their knees together. It's a demand that is created on the body when we need more hip extension torque and more momentum out of that bottom. We're going to create that little adductor whip there. So it is performance boosting, but it's a natural movement. It's a subconscious movement. It's not typically it's not something that you're coaching or cueing somebody to do there. So now if you break that out from sport to sport, CrossFitters, Olympic lifters who are typically sitting deeper into squats, you're more likely to see an athlete in that realm create an adductor whip under high loads. Versus potentially a power lifter who has a little bit more of a sit back squat that typically their depth is not quite as deep because they only need to hit parallel and no more. You may still see a little bit of this, but it's not as common in a power lifter as it would be in somebody who is looking to go full depth squat under high loads there. So I would see it a little bit more in females. That's why if you watch like CrossFit Games, you're going to see athletes like Tia Toomey, who is a phenomenal athlete and just crushing the field right now, Brooke Wells, people like that who are really powerful athletes. You're still going to catch this adductor whip, a little bit more common in the female population due to some of the anatomical variances there. But again, there's no way I'm walking up to Tia right now and saying, hey, Tia, we got to be a little concerned about the fact that when you're squatting 340 pounds that your knees are coming together quickly there. She's doing her best afterwards to drive her knees out and engage her glutes. This is something that she's very well in tune with her body, and so are other skilled squatters and athletes as well there too. So that's the good of the situation. Adductor whip, bilateral knee movement on the inward direction as we ascend or come up from the bottom of that squat. And we're really not going to be considering that to be a true fault. If anything, that's a natural performance booster there. So the good, now the bad and the ugly. So there are times that we do and should be concerned about knee valgus position during a squat. Let's take another squatter that we're analyzing. I don't care, front squat, back squat. If you're catching them in a clean or a snatch, doesn't matter. On that descent, if we're seeing a knee, and typically it's one, maybe two, but also I see it more commonly just unilaterally. If we're seeing a single knee start to collapse on the descent in that position, that's when my little trigger in my brain is going off of, hey, this is something that we need to be concerned about. We need to be picking up on this, especially if that athlete has come in with hip pain, or they're talking to you about hip pain or knee pain or maybe even ankle pain at this time. You're starting to look at this global picture of how they're moving and starting to pick out these little variances. So again, demo in this situation on the descent, if we watch the knee here as we go down, if we start to see a knee collapse medially inward into that valgus position while the other knee is in a nice neutral position over the toes, I'm going to be bringing on my spotlight to that situation and start to look at there. Again, bilaterally it could happen, typically more commonly unilateral. So that's one time we'll see a knee valgus fault where we're going to want to break that out a little bit further. Or we might see it on the ascent position. And this time it would be similar to maybe what you're seeing with a skilled athlete where knees are collapsing in either unilaterally, again, common, or bilaterally sometimes as well. But knees collapse inward and it's just uncontrolled, meaning they're not really doing a great job at fighting their way out of that position. So it still may be a similar mechanism that's leading to that. But the difference here in a skilled versus unskilled athlete, or untrained athlete, I should say, is that trained athlete is like feeling that whip, but also knowing that they need to create that drive out, where someone who has less experience with that squat may fall into that valgus position and continue to ride that all the way up through the squat. And we're not really looking for that in that situation. We don't want that to be the case there. So ascent, we're seeing single or bilateral knee collapse or valgus position. And then on the descent, we may also see that single or bilateral collapse as well too. So, and again, we're often going to be linking this with people who are describing or coming to you with pain. And you might see this in other movements that require hip and knee flexion, box step-ups, lunges and variations like that. It doesn't necessarily just have to be in the squat. So if you find an athlete like this who has either a descending fault of knee valgus or an ascending fault of knee valgus, we still need to figure out, what are we going to do about this? Like, how are we going to figure this out, and how are we going to coach this athlete to not have this position and this fault anymore? And I think it really comes down to three separate attacks that we're going to have to look at. One of them being technique. So let's take an athlete, for example, maybe who has what you start to pick up on is an exceptionally wide stance. So a wide stance and maybe wider than their base of support should be in that squat. And as they descend into that squat, the fact that they're so abducted, externally rotated already may place them into a position where that knee valgus fault is almost being forced because they can't keep up with the hip flexion, knee flexion, and knee over toe position there. And it may be just a technique thing. And I'm just using this as one singular example, but this may be an athlete you walk up to and say, hey, Susan, the way I'm picking up on things right now, that right knee seems to be collapsing in every time. And I want you to try this for me. I want you to bring your feet in a little bit. I want them to be closer to that hip width stance. And as you go down into your squat, I want you to think about driving your knees out there. So we change the stance, we change your thought process, and that could be a simple fix. Like all of a sudden, just like that, this athlete may be able to control or better control that loss of knee valgus position there. So technique and understanding the squat is one. We need to be able to look at how someone's moving and understand, can I just vary or change or modify their movement or their setup position to make that a more advantageous squat for them? If technique, setup, everything like that looks okay, maybe this is more of a motor control issue. Maybe this is something that either they're not cognitively aware of their knee position, or they're having a disconnect between the hip and the knee during their squat, and we have to look at some motor control cues and techniques. So we'll start with cueing first. Here at ICE, and I think if any coaches listen to this or any PTs looking at this, we always talk about external cues. Like if we had this situation, we want external, non-body related cues. I don't want to tell this athlete if their knee is collapsing in that they have this knee valgus fault, their knee is collapsing in, and I want you to engage your glutes and drive your hips outward. Like all that is very internal focused. And for some of that might make sense, and you might be able to pick that apart and work with it. But for a lot of our athletes, especially if they are newer to a movement, for example, that this is going to be overwhelming. And we want to really make more of an external, like movement-driven focus on a cue here. So an example could be we'll go back to Susan. Hey, Susan, what I see is going on is that your right knee is collapsing in. I want you to pretend like you have a band wrapped around both your knees, and I want you to rip that rubber band as you're going down and up in that squat. I want you to really press those knees out into that band. Susan goes back and squats. She's thinking about this rubber band around her knees. She's driving her knees out. That could be a good motor control and an external cue fixed for this athlete here. So driving the knees out, band, spread the floor. There's all these different options that may come. The key with coaching is recognizing which cue is working best with your athlete, not giving them too many, giving them one, maybe two. Let them internalize that and run with it and see what you get. So you try technique and setup cues, those aren't working. You try some motor control cues, those aren't working. Maybe some neurofacilitation techniques. Maybe I tie a band around that right knee that's collapsing in. What I actually am going to do is pull it into that fall. I'm going to pull it into more knee valgus, which in our brain and our body, what that's going to make that athlete do is feel that fault almost exceptionally more than they would actually be doing, and they're going to have to fight against it. They're going to feel, wow, that feels terrible. I'm going to drive my knee out and away from this band, and this is that neurofacilitation technique of trying to create that brain-body awareness of what the knee should be doing in the squat, and then you remove that band or that cue, and you have them squat again, see if they can mimic or create that motion again. So cueing, tactile cueing, tapping on the knee while they're going down the squat. We got all those cueing options that we can go through. And if that still doesn't work, the next thing I'm looking at is there possibly a mobility restriction here? Does this person have hip mobility issues? Does they have a foot and ankle mobility? Maybe they lack some tibial glide or some dorsiflexion, and as they're going down into that squat, the ankle runs out of mobility. It still needs to be going knees over toes, but it physically can't. So the only other option is for that knee to dive inwards in that knee valgus position. But that's where hitting up like a course like the CMFA course, especially that live course where we can really dive into how we analyze movement and break these things out, and then go over some mobility testing to see, can we isolate a single joint or a couple of joint ranges of motion that may be leading to some of these faults. And if that's the case, then we say, hey, we got to find either modifications. Maybe that's an athlete that if we place under their heels a little bit of elevation, some 5-pound change plates or something like that, we give them a little more dorsiflexion, you see that knee collapse kind of dissipates or kind of fades away. We know that, hey, if we can work on your ankle mobility or maybe give you some substitutes for your shoes, some Versalis or something like that, we can get you squatting in a more healthy pattern and ultimately performing better that way as well too. So you break that fault down from ascending faults to descending faults. Figure out, is it a motor control issue? Is it a technique and position issue? Is it a mobility issue? And after that, we just hone in on that thing. We drive it home until this athlete starts to perform better. So conclusion, knee valgus faults can be a thing that we need to be coaching, cueing, and working our athletes out of, especially when associated with pain. But also we'll see in the good situation in this topic that adductor whip, which is more of a performance booster. Again, not typically a conscious choice to whip their knees in, but more of a physical and adaptive demand to the amount of hip torque they're needing to create out of the bottom of that hole. Those adductor magnus muscles kick in, and you'll see that double knee drive in, but again, controlled on the way out there. So little quick caveat there on the difference between those two. Hopefully that was helpful for you guys. If you're looking for any more information on this, ice.com, ptoниce.com, hop on there, look at some of our clinical management of the fitness athletes course. This is like literally like a 2-slide topic that we have amongst some other load of topics in the fitness industry there. So if you found this any benefit to you, I think those courses would be super helpful. All right, have a great weekend. Enjoy the talk. We'll catch up with you guys later. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.